This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
All right. So I said I had a channel update to make. Figure since I have everybody held hostage at the beginning of the show, I can go ahead and make that announcement now. I think I made it public a while ago that I made a job switch in the last couple months. In addition to it bringing me a lot closer to the Cleveland area, it's also doubled my workload significantly since I moved to Ohio. And it's required a lot of commitment, especially for out of town or out of state travel services. So, long story short, I'm going to be away on business from basically June 9th up through, I'm thinking early to mid-July. Could be longer. I'm still not entirely sure. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping things go according to plan and we can get this project done in 4 weeks. Originally, I wasn't even supposed to be there for all 4 weeks. But then we decided that I was needed for the whole job. Lucky me. No, actually, I'm perfectly okay with that. Not complaining at all. Now, the reason it's going to affect things on the channel is that, A, I'm not sure how much free time I'm going to have to actually watch the wrestling shows. Moreover, B, I'm not really sure how much time I'm going to have to record anything. I'm already skeptical about the idea of bringing my computer on the plane with me. The less stuff I have to travel with, the better. Especially when it comes to electronics. I still may end up bringing my computer, but it'll solely be for the purpose of business. So what does that mean for the channel? It basically means I'm not going to be active for a while. Which does suck, because I've been doing this consistently for about 3 years. I don't think there's ever been a stretch of more than a week where I wasn't uploading stuff or going through all these wrestling libraries. It basically means I won't be able to do the King of the Ring review, which is kind of unfortunate. Although in reality, the only thing that anybody ever remembers about that pay-per-view is the Austin 316 promo. So it's not like I'm missing anything spectacular. I'll definitely be back in time to review the Great American Bash 89. That won't be an issue. But we're basically going to be missing about 4 weeks of classic coverage for everything we've been talking about. Which means that when I come back, I'm going to be scrambling to try to catch up on all the footage I missed. But I wanted to share some insight there from the top because, I pretty much made the decision that there's no way I'm going to be able to balance out the workload with what I'm doing here on the channel. When I did that out-of-town job a few weeks ago in Wisconsin, I barely had enough time to record the Mid-South and World Class segments. If I recall correctly, I don't even think I uploaded that podcast until Saturday morning, because I didn't even get a chance to edit anything until I got back to Ohio that Friday. The whole thing was a mess, and I knew it would be. I probably should have just not done the recap, but, again, there was the WCW pay-per-view, and I didn't want to miss that. Right now, though, I just need to put my focus on this trip and commit to this project. I'm not going to say what it is. I don't want to give away too much private information here. I also don't like really talking about my personal life all that much. I'm in the music workshop industry. That's as much info as I'm comfortable dishing out. So here's my schedule for the next week. We're going to do a Monday show today. We're going to do a Friday show this coming week. And then next Monday, I'm going to be gone. So we'll have 2 more episodes, and I'll be back hopefully by mid-July at the earliest. It's a bitter pill to swallow, considering how much stock and effort I put into this hobby over the last few years. But at the same time, gotta make money. I've pretty much owned up to the fact that this channel is never going to grow to the point where I'll be able to monetize it. Nor would I really want to on YouTube. It's exactly that. A hobby. It's something that I'm passionate about doing, but it's more like a fun activity as opposed to an actual profitable side hustle. So with all that, there's your update. And let's get into the show. At least I'll be able to fit this in before the hiatus. And I'm glad. Because this is a big one. It's the 5 Starr Wrestling Report. The wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. Here on YouTube and Rumble on Mondays and Fridays for new shows and new content. Make sure you subscribe, comment, and like the show for me. Today we got a banger WWF pay-per-view to recap. And it was a literal banger in the state of South Carolina in May of 1996. We'll get into that. Today we're covering WWF In Your House 8. A very infamous In Your House event. And most of that having nothing to do with the quality of the actual card. Although the matches on paper, as we've been talking about with the Raw reviews, it was pretty abysmal. Even if things had gone according to plan, I still don't think the show would have been any good. Outside maybe the strap match with Savio and Austin. And after having watched the first 40 seconds of the show, I got a confession to make. As much as I love to harp on the modern WWE product for how much it sucks, the one thing that I will absolutely put over above anything else, today's package production blows any of this old WWF crap out of the water. My God, these In Your House videos were so cornball. I understand we were dealing with 1996 technology here, but yeah, these things are terrible. It's like something a 4th grader would have put together in computer class. So when it comes to In Your House 8, better known as Beware of Dog, because, you know, Davey Boy was wrestling in the main event for the title. It's crafty. I think I've done a halfway decent job explaining what went wrong with this show during the Raw recaps. If you're looking for an entertaining 2 hours to kill, I highly recommend you go check out Conrad Thompson and Bruce Pritchard cover this show from several years ago. It was on Bruce's podcast. They go over the whole pay-per-view, talk about what it was like trying to run the show with no power in the building. Vince was apparently just sitting at the announce desk the whole time drinking coffee and watching all the matches take place in the dark. Meanwhile, Bruce is running around the building like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to figure out what the hell they're supposed to do. It's good. I've never been the biggest Bruce Pritchard fan, but he's got some entertaining stories. But that's exactly what happened here in Florence, South Carolina. I believe the only time the WWF actually ran a pay-per-view in South Carolina. I can only imagine why, based on the fiasco that was this event. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details. The long and short of it is, there was a terrible storm the day of the pay-per-view. Somehow they managed to get a sold-out 6,000 people into that godforsaken Civic Center, despite the bad weather. And that's how dedicated those fans were to see this event. They got through the first main card match with no issues. And then right as Savio Vega was making his entrance for the Caribbean strap match with Steve Austin, that's when the power died. And they were scrambling to try to figure out what to do from there. I think Vince just flat out told Bruce, "What do you want me to do, pal?" And you know, that's probably one of the most sane, rational justifications for something like this happening. Because what do you do? I mean, the people could partially see what was going on in the building because of the fluorescent lighting that the generators were helping to operate. It's not like it was completely pitch black. And we all know Vince's mentality of the show must go on. See Over the Edge 99 is a bad example of that. So they legitimately weathered the storm and just went on with things as planned. And then they made the decision later in the event that they were going to re-air several of the dark matches on tape delay for that weekend's WWF Superstars. Because even though the people in the building could partially see what was going on, there was no way you could justifiably present all those matches for a pay-per-view viewing experience. It was just not feasible. And they did eventually regain power right before the scheduled main event with Davey and Shawn. So the Florence fans basically got an opener and a main event with full lighting. And everything else in the middle was the equivalent to a shoot dark match. It's like when WWE did that garbage-ass Lights Out match with LA Knight and Bray Wyatt a few years ago. Only this wasn't planned. So when you see the network release of this pay-per-view, they show you the two matches that aired on the 26th of May in Florence. And then there were 3 other matches that aired in the North Charleston Coliseum on the 28th that they redid. Specifically for the video release and to give fans some kind of refund. But, yeah, that was a bit of background for this epic disaster of an event. And we're going to talk about it right now. Now remember, this is my review of the network release version. I'm not going to sit here and talk about 5 matches that aired in the dark at the Florence Civic Center. The only person that got any mild enjoyment out of that was Vince McMahon himself. So the official card open proper is Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Mark Marrow. The one match that the fans were fortunate enough to watch at the Florence Civic Center before the power went out. To which I immediately thought to myself, those poor people. They got stiffed so hard. Imagine buying a ticket to see a pay-per-view, and the only match you get to see with full lighting in the arena is a match featuring Mark Marrow. I'd have cut myself. No, I actually felt bad for the people that were still apparently filing into the building while this match was going on. Those crazy fans that traversed the horrible weather outside only to get like 10 minutes of actual wrestling. At least that would explain why the building sounded eerily quiet through most of this match. I just presumed everybody fell asleep watching Hunter work over Mark Marrow's arm for an hour. Not that I have an issue with guys working over body parts to tell a story in a wrestling match. The problem is that Mark Marrow isn't exactly Ricky Morton in terms of being a credible babyface in peril. So the match is more so tedious as opposed to exciting. This match would have been so much more tolerable if they shaved off like 5 minutes of heat. Do we really need to see Hunter work over Marrow's left arm for 6 straight minutes? No. Nobody needed to see that. The ending sequence was laughably stupid. And in hindsight, I'm still trying to figure out whether or not that was intentional. Keep in mind, this is all post-curtain call. So Hunter's still technically in the doghouse with management. No pun intended. If the end goal was to make Hunter look like an absolute idiot, then they achieved their mission. So Marrow's making his comeback, and he goes to set up that flipping senton spot where he basically comes down with all of his body weight over the guy's head and shoulders. But Hunter dodges it. Probably because he legitimately didn't want to risk having his neck broken from that stupid-ass move. So Marrow comes up selling his knee. And they go through this heat spot where Hunter's beating on Marrow and trying to get Sable to watch as he's threatening to pedigree him. And then... well... Sable turns away to avoid looking. Hunter just lets go of Marrow. And he goes out and grabs Sable to make her watch for some peculiar reason. Surprise. Mark Marrow countered the pedigree and does the catapult spot where he rams Hunter's head into the turnbuckle post. And then he just pins him 1, 2, 3. So Triple H was defeated via, I had the guy beat, but I decided not to pin him because I'm a dipshit. And yes, for the record, I know he's a heel, but considering he was still the fall guy for all the crap that happened in MSG, I'm still thinking this finish was done with a deliberate purpose. Not as a burial, but to send a message for sure. Maybe that's me conspiracy theorizing. I don't know whether or not the original plan was to have Hunter win this match. Considering he was originally groomed to win King of the Ring, my guess is that he was originally intended to go over here. And then they switched gears when they decided they were going with Austin instead. But like I said, at least the people got to see that one with full lighting in the building. That was your opener for part 1 of In Your House. And this was also the part where they had to go through some major editing with the post-production. So before they aired all the tape delay matches from the North Charleston Coliseum, they showed the main event with Davey Boy and Shawn for the WWF title. Now that the arena lights were back up and running and they managed to get the pay-per-view feedback. I'm sure those Florence fans were fucking pissed. Can you imagine the loyalty of those people? Sitting through a half-lit building to watch a bunch of dark matches. And there were still all those people that stuck around to watch the main event when they got the power back. Frankly, I'm not sure they had a choice. The weather probably prevented anybody from leaving. If the people did try to leave, they would have been fucked. So yeah, we get the main event second on the card. If you had no idea how they pieced any of this together for the video release, you would be confused as all get out. Sitting there like, why are they airing the WWF Championship match second on the card? Well, the answer is it wasn't second on the card originally. It was just preceded by a bunch of matches that nobody could see. They also aired a pre-tape in the back with all members of Camp Cornette. There were two things I jotted down about it. Number one, Owen Hart got a manager's license to be at ringside for the match. Why he needed one? Your guess is as good as mine. The other thing is that Clarence Mason was standing there with a neck brace and an arm sling. And if you were expecting anybody to explain the reason for this, well, you were sadly mistaken. There was literally no mention of it. Clarence looked like he'd been run through a woodworking factory and they just blew it off like nothing was wrong. I also still have no idea what the fuck is going on with Kurt Hennig. He's just randomly showing up in segments involving HBK. If it's a storyline related reason, I have absolutely no recollection of what it's building toward. It's clearly not leading to Shawn Michaels versus Mr. Perfect. Although I'm sure they were still holding out hope that he would get cleared to wrestle again at some point. Then he just winds up leaving for WCW in less than a year. So after they prolonged the ring entrances for as long as humanly possible, they decided it was necessary to kill another 3 minutes of pay-per-view time by having Clarence Mason serve Shawn Michaels with a summons. What he inferred was attempted alienation of affection. I did not bother to look up whether or not this is a legit charge. I guess by Shawn tearing up the paperwork, it essentially rendered the whole thing meaningless. If only that worked in the real world. You can just get served, but then you take the paperwork and rip it up, and now the charge is null and void. So all of that was a complete waste of time. By this point in the pay-per-view, I think most fans in attendance were just craving some decent, solid pro wrestling after having sat in pitch black for the last hour. What we really needed here was a great pay-per-view main event to send the people home happy. So guess what the fans didn't get? Yeah. I should put a caveat there. They got mostly 13 minutes of mediocre wrestling, a closing great 4 minutes, and then an absolutely bogus finish that just took the piss out of the room. We also had what probably amounted to the best bump Earl Hebner ever took in his career. And there was actually a fabulous moment during the heat, too. Bulldog is working over Shawn, and he's got him down in a chin lock for a while. It's not entirely silent in the building, but quiet enough to where if you were screaming obscenities to the top of your lungs, it would draw a little bit of attention. People would probably turn heads. There's one singular woman off screen who's just shrieking to the top of her lungs. This got annoying real fast. So much so that even Davey Boy looked in her direction at one point and yelled, "Shut up!" I laughed so hard. People, don't be that guy. Or girl. If there is no reason for you to be screaming shit at ear-piercing volumes, don't do it. It does not warrant good attention. So I mentioned the Earl bump a minute ago. It was by far one of the greatest ref bumps I've ever seen in my life. And I've been watching wrestling for a long time. They go to set up a spot where Shawn's about to shoot Davey off the ropes. The timing of this was just impeccable. Shawn whips Davey off. Davey runs at what had to have been nearly full speed. He bulldozes over Hebner like a fucking torpedo. And I do mean that. Like, I thought Earl was deceased. Knowing how many matches that he would officiate later on in his career, the fact that I know he lived through this, I still thought he was dead. I was convinced. The Montreal Screwjob never happened. That was not the real Earl Hebner. It was a doppelganger. This was the real Earl Hebner. And he was dead. God, Davey just creamed this guy. Hebner went flying out of the ring like someone shot him out of a cannon. And so Shawn's got Bulldog set up for the Sweet Chin music. But Owen tries to hit the ring and run a distraction. Only to get hit with a super kick anyway. By this point, we had a second referee in the ring. And so Davey tried to cut off Shawn and put him away with a power slam. But Shawn reversed that and gave him a German suplex from out of the corner. And that was where mass confusion hit the fan. A bridging German. Probably the only time I've ever seen Shawn hit that move in his career. And of course, it leads to the big post-match controversy where the two referees are arguing over whose shoulders were pinned down. You know, the heels think they've won, but Hebner insists that Shawn pinned Davey. And they actually did a really good job capturing this on film. You kind of see Earl Hebner in the background counting the second fall while the first referee's counting. So it was a double pinfall in the classic sense. This is great. You see Diana Smith try to hijack the WWF title to take it with her. And of course she holds it up in the aisleway with dirt face and the fucking thing's upside down. She pulled a great Khali 20 years prior by holding up the world title in front of the camera for an important shot. And she was holding the thing the wrong way. Oh, Diana. Gosh, she was horrible. Nice woman, I'm sure. But she was not meant for public consumption. So finally, Gorilla Monsoon comes back to take the belt away and rules on a decision. Because both men's shoulders were technically down during the pinfall, the matches rolled a draw. A draw. Indeed. Because Because that is most definitely what the Florence fans wanted to hear after this absolute debacle of a pay-per-view. 2 hours into the show, and they get a world title main event that goes to a no contest. Dude. Could you have fucked the fans any harder? Literally. This is the equivalent to kicking everybody in the groin and then pissing in their mouth while they're down. Now, I personally didn't have an issue with the finish because I'm pretty much numb to the Dusty finish booking. There's nothing wrong with booking a finish like this on principle. It was just the wrong time and the wrong place to do it. After everything those poor people had to sit through, this was not a good time to be screwing the people over. Which is precisely what they did. I mean, what else is there to say? The last several minutes were awesome, but that finish just totally killed the people. At the very least, they probably owed it to the fans to go with a clean finish. It's not like anybody was buying that Davey stood a chance of walking out with the strap here. God bless them. I don't know. I mean, I guess we can call Florence, South Carolina doomed territory in the annals of wrestling history. There's probably a reason WWF never ran a pay-per-view there again. At least not to my knowledge. And let's be honest, the crowd wasn't very energetic pre or post power outage. Even the Hunter Mark Mero match was kind of a dud in terms of crowd investment. So maybe the whole thing was just snake bit from the beginning. But yeah, that was part 1 of In Your House, Beware of Dog. And of course, now we'll fast forward to 2 days later in the North Charleston Coliseum as we cover part 2 of In Your House, Beware of Dog. But this time with actual lighting and decent crowd investment. We actually had Jim Ross and Kurt Hennig calling this portion of the event. So it was a little change of flavor for once. It's good. I needed a detox from Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler. Mainly Vince. And so we go right into the Caribbean strap match with Savio Vega and Steve Austin. There was also a stipulation they added to this match last minute. Spoiler for Raw. But of course, with the fucked up way all this was taped, you couldn't really avoid it. The stipulation this time is that if Austin couldn't beat Savio, then Ted DiBiase would leave the WWF. And at the time they shot that on Raw, Austin apparently wasn't included into that in storyline. So he just glared a hole through DiBiase when he made the announcement. Didn't look all too pleased. And, I mean, that pretty much told you right there who was losing this match. I think, technically, Savio already won the first match they had at the Florence Civic Center. So, Austin was 0 for 2. And of course, you're probably asking yourself, what is the difference between a regular strap match and a Caribbean strap match? The short answer is, there is none. You still have to touch all 4 corners of the ring to win. I did appreciate that they at least tried to lay into each other a bit here. They didn't pussyfoot around with the strap shots. I still hate the touching all four corners of the ring gimmick. It's so goofy to me. It always has been. So they took turns whipping each other like a dog, to quote David Crockett. JR's commentary was great. That goes without saying. Mr. Perfect was fine, but I don't think he and JR had a ton of chemistry together here. They were decent, but I've seen better commentary teams. But like I said, the work was good. Boys worked hard, really beat the hell out of each other. It was a pretty brutal match, and there was no blood. You know, I still never really cared all that much about this program from the onset. But credit to them. They got the people into it. The pace was very much back and forth from bell to bell. You know, the whole drama with these kinds of matches is them milking the touching all four corners spot. So they came up with some innovative ways to stop the momentum. A couple scary spots where both guys were taking hard bumps out to the floor. There was one spot where Savio took a backdrop over the top rope, but because they were still tied together, Austin's momentum also carried him over the top rope as well. Guy came down and landed right on his ankles. I have no idea how he didn't break them. If anything, I think this match helped to establish more of that vicious side to Austin's heel persona. You know, up to this point, he hasn't really had the chance to showcase that part of his gimmick. Now, the no DQ stipulation helped, that's for sure. And they did go with a pretty formulaic finish to these kinds of matches, where the heel tries to tie the babyface up by dragging him around all four corners, but he doesn't realize that the babyface is also touching the corners behind his back. But here they actually did it perfectly, because DiBiase's following Austin around the ring while he's got Savio tied up. Neither heel is paying attention to Savio for the first two rounds. They're totally oblivious. Finally, they get to the third turnbuckle where DiBiase turns around and realizes what's going on. So he's trying to flag down Austin and warn him of what's happening. But Austin still doesn't realize it. So they get into a brief tug of war in the middle of the ring. And then Austin tries to yank Savio toward the last corner. Then Savio runs into the corner and accidentally runs into it. But of course it wins in the match. And the heels look like bimbos as a result. And that part was good. And you see, that's how you make the heels look stupid without completely throwing them under the bus. Not like what they did with Hunter in the opener. But all in all, again, for a feud in a match that I didn't really give two shits about going in, I actually enjoyed this a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. And this is, believe it or not, my first time actually seeing this version of it. I had never seen the edited version of this pay-per-view. So the footage they aired from the NC Coliseum, this is my first time viewing it. I can only imagine it was 1,000 times better than what the people saw in Florence 2 days prior. But yeah, solid stuff. Still a dumb feud in hindsight. And the build to this on television was appalling. But the payoff worked. So good on them. Two professionals that took a shit sandwich and made it work in execution. And as per these stipulations here, DiBiase is now banished from the WWF. And funny enough, will soon be showing up on Nitro as an honorary member of the New World Order, brother. So, yeah. Contract negotiations. There was a lot of bargaining going on during this period of the Monday Night Wars. Back during a time when contracts actually had some teeth. And you as a talent could sort of leverage a little bit to see if you can milk the boss for more money. For some guys, it paid off. Others, not so much. So the next match they re-aired was Yokozuna versus Vader. I think that was purely for Vince's pleasure. I can't conceive of another human being alive that would want to witness this match a second time. No offense to Leon, but unfortunately he wasn't working with a prime and ready Yokozuna here in 1996. This match was probably best kept in the dark. Back in Florence when it first aired. This is just sad. Yoko couldn't do fucking shit here. And they wasted like 4 minutes teasing a sumo collision spot. In hindsight, that was probably the best part of the whole match. Because then we had to see him actually attempt wrestling spots. And that was not a pleasant sighting. Yoko tried to go after Vader's knee. And that was the whole backstory to this feud from the beginning. If you can even recall that far back. When Vader dropped all of his body weight on Yoko's leg like 3 times on Raw. And they had to cart Yoko off on a forklift. I like the moment in this match when they deliberately threw Lex Luger under the bus. There was a spot where Vader went to try to body slam Yoko. JR goes, "The only man I think I've ever seen slam Yokozuna would be Ahmed Johnson." Right. Yeah, we'll just totally neglect that period like 3 years ago when they had Luger show up in the USS Intrepid to body slam Yokozuna. I mean, it only facilitated him as a top babyface and positioned him for a title shot at that year's SummerSlam. No big deal or anything. So, blah blah, smoke and mirrors. Blah blah, Jim Cornette showing up on the apron to run a distraction. Yokozuna grabbed him and tossed him into the ring to do some stuff with him. He gave him a headbutt and set him up in the corner for the bonsai drop. But then Vader swooped in and managed to save Cornette's life. Legitimately. Probably would have been dead if Yoko had landed on him. And then Vader went after Yoko's bad leg and eventually put him away with a Vader bomb. I wrote down, this needed to be seen again. Why? Other than the fact that they're setting up Vader for a SummerSlam title match with Shawn. Probably figured they need to keep establishing him as the next top threat. I get that. Doesn't mean we needed to see the match again. The question is, what was worse? That or the casket match with Undertaker and Goldust? Guess that would kind of depend on your expectations. Did you have expectations for the Intercontinental title match? Did you have high hopes that it would be any good? I had quite the opposite. I had no hope. So apparently Goldust has another fetish. or I guess you could call it a preference in this case. We know that he has a kayfabe obsession for necrophilia. Now that he's trying to boink The Undertaker. We also now know that he has a preference for black men as well. As we found out on the following Monday Night Raw when he tried to give Ahmed Johnson mouth-to-mouth. For those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about, stay tuned. I'll save the rant for then. When I look back here, honestly, I can't even in good faith say this was worse than the Yoko Vader match. Because this at least had some decent wrestling spots, despite the stipulation. If this would have just been a normal wrestling match without all the hokey casket antics, I'd probably be putting this over as the best Goldust match to date. All the people that love to praise the backlot brawl with him and Piper from WrestleMania, I'll take the work here with Goldust and Taker over the work with Piper and Goldust from the backlot brawl. I mean, even JR and Mr. Perfect admitted to the fact that Goldust was showing real grit and toughness in this match. Translation, he decided to stop being a flaming homosexual for 5 minutes and attempt to be an actual pro wrestler. So they're having a pretty decent little match here. Everything's going along swimmingly in terms of the action. And we eventually get to the spot where Goldust gives Taker the tombstone and tries to lay him in the casket. At which point the casket decided to go into business for itself. And as Dustin's trying to press the lid down to force it shut, Taker ends up jerking the lid and breaks the hinges off. So Goldust and the casket lid go tumbling to the floor, which made things kind of awkward for the angle they did later in the match. But they did some more stuff. Eventually Taker made his comeback and gave Goldust the tombstone. And I think most people evidently knew what was coming next. It was so evident that when Mankind appeared inside the coffin, nobody in the building reacted. It's as if they were expecting it. So Mankind puts Taker in the mandible claw almost immediately. And he ends up dragging Taker inside the coffin. From there he slams the broken lid shut to declare the end of the match. He then somehow locks the casket shut, even though I don't ever recall the referees having a key of any description. And well, it was predictable as fuck. Not that predictable is necessarily a bad thing. I guess I was just expecting something a little less unfortuitous. Look, it's one thing to already have the inclination that Mankind was going to interfere, but to have him pop out of the casket, could you telegraph that part anymore? And that wasn't even the dumbest part. What was dumber was him opening the casket at the very end, only to uncover that Taker was no longer inside. And again, none of this got a reaction from the people. They do this big dramatic reveal of opening the casket lid. When Paul Bearer sees that Taker's gone, the entire arena collectively goes, huh? They got plenty of ominous fog, but no Undertaker. Where did he go? Guess we're meant to believe he descended into the depths of hell. Either that or he escaped through the trap door under the casket. But we're not here to break the illusion. And for the record, there were a few other matches that they aired as actual dark matches on the original pay-per-view. But let's be honest, nobody cared about those. The Smoking Guns beat the Hog Farmers to win the tag straps after Sonny apparently turned on the Hog Farmers and joined up with Billy and Bart. Oh yeah, I guess I also failed to mention that critical part of the story where Sonny also apparently turned on the Body Donnas. In an angle that happened off camera and was never directly mentioned at any point on Raw. So you go figure that one out. Tammy living her real-life gimmick on camera. Being the human body carousel where she hopped from guy to guy. So now she's alongside the heel Smoking Guns. Because I was bound to finally get them over after fucking 3 years of investment. We also had Bob Holly going over Isaac Yankem for some ungodly reason. Jake Roberts apparently beat Justin Hawk Bradshaw. The Ultimate Warrior beat Owen Hart. And Ahmed Johnson beat Jerry Lawler. Mercifully, all those matches were kept off the network release. Although there is a part of me that kind of wants to see that Warrior-Owen match. Just to see if even Owen could get something watchable out of him. Probably not. But there you have it. That was In Your House, Beware of Dog. And now we're going to transition over to this really fucked up episode of Monday Night Raw where we were basically sandwiched in between both sets of the pay-per-view. This is the May 27th episode of Raw. So it aired the day before they taped the second half of the In Your House event. Did I hear correctly too? This was in Omaha, Nebraska. So you're telling me some of the crew had to fly from South Carolina to Nebraska, literally just to fly back to South Carolina the following day to tape the second half of the In Your House pay-per-view? That's really screwed up. That's some Bill Watts level fucked up shit. It's also important to mention that we're coming up on the King of the Ring pay-per-view. So they have a bunch of early preliminary round matches to get through. And boy, what a way to kickstart the tournament here in 1996. A match that everybody was clamoring to see again. Because it went so well the first time. The Ultimate Warrior versus Goldust. Yo, let's run that back again. Maybe it'll be good this time. Spoiler. It was not. If the last match they had was -5 stars, this is -4. At least they actually attempted to wrestle this time. Now, Vince was obviously addressing the pay-per-view feed going down the previous night. That was kind of one of the big central talking points on this program. So they strategically put a camera on somebody in the crowd with a sign that read, "Let's keep the power on tonight." Very bitter. I would have been advocating for the power to go out so I didn't have to watch this god-awful match. I would like to know what Brain Trust decided. Let's let the Ultimate Warrior wrestle a 13-minute TV match. Let me emphasize, 13 minutes. Not seconds. Minutes. Warrior was blown up 13 seconds into the match. They needed to keep wrestling. So they're out there having this atrocious television match. The longer it went, the more visibly tired Warrior got. To the point where his comeback looked like it was happening in slow motion. God, his rope running was just hideous to look at. Here's the part that I loved. Goldust tried to take a powder and get himself intentionally counted out. But then Ahmed Johnson showed up in the aisleway to pick Goldust up over his shoulder and carry him back to the ring. And I thought to myself, well, at least it'll lead to a good finish. No sooner should I fucking say that. Guess what it was? A break spot. Then they came back for 6 more minutes of horrendous wrestling. I was like, so Ahmed's literal only purpose here was to throw Goldust back into the ring? Because they come back from break, Goldust is seen stalling on the floor for another minute. That spot with Ahmed literally led to nothing. I was fuming by this point. So Goldust gets an interminable amount of heat on Warrior. I think I fell asleep watching. Then Warrior made that shitty-ass comeback I referenced earlier. At which point Goldust tries to take another powder. Only this time, like an absolute dolt, the Warrior follows Goldust up the aisleway, and he gets himself intentionally counted out. So neither guy advances in the tournament as a result. Then Lawler showed up to try to attack Warrior with Goldust's director's chair, but then Warrior chased him off and broke the remnants of it in the ring. An impeccable start to this 1996 King of the Ring tournament. The very first prelim round, it's a fucking double count out, wherein both participants basically didn't give a crap about losing. So this tournament already sucks. And we know who wins. It's viewed as one of the more pivotal King of the Ring tournaments in history. I mean, while the very first round ends with both guys getting ousted. Oddly enough, the very next pre-tape featured the guy that wound up winning the tournament. And I already kind of addressed this with the pay-per-view recap, so I won't spend too long talking about it. This is where DiBiase made the announcement that if Austin doesn't win the Caribbean strap match with Savio tomorrow night, that DiBiase would leave the WWF. And Austin got pissed at him. Not even really pissed. He was just flummoxed. Like it was the first time he was hearing the information as well. And I was a big DiBiase fan. But in hindsight, I definitely get the argument that Austin didn't really need him as a mouthpiece or a manager. I never really understood what the purpose was for having Austin be a mute for as long as he was. I have to imagine that Vince knew he could talk to an extent. He wasn't a great promo in WCW from what I remember, but he was decent. He could manage his way through a talk segment if he needed to. And let's be honest, DiBiase by this point didn't really serve much of a purpose anyway. Even if Vince had offered him enough money to re-sign, I couldn't really see DiBiase taking the deal. What was he really gaining by managing guys like Austin or the 1-2-3 Kid? So I think him leaving was the right call, because it allowed Austin to get over on his own and break out of his shell a little bit more. In any case, they spent several minutes with Vince going over what happened on Sunday night. And then we had the Smoking Guns versus the Body Donnas. Now, with Sonny in the Guns corner, part of me is thinking the only reason they ever put Sonny with Billy and Bart was to give her an excuse to come out wearing skimpy Daisy Dukes. Not that I'm complaining about that, just being honest. The problem is that it was basically another Mark Mero Sable dilemma where Sonny was clearly the bigger star than the two guys. So it never really mattered because it never got the Guns anymore over with the fans. They were still bland and boring as shit. I spent most of the match trying to figure out who the fucking faces and heels were. I could have sworn the Guns were heels. They literally shot an angle where Sonny turned on the Godwins and helped the Guns win the tag belts. And the Godwins were most definitely babyfaces in that scenario. But then the Guns come out for this match with the Body Donnas, who I seem to recall were also heels. But they were also babyfaces for a brief window, which never really went anywhere. So, the Guns ended up working as de facto babyfaces, even though I'm sure they're supposed to be heels in storyline. I don't know what the fuck was going on here. The match was fine. Billy Gunn and Chris Candido did some cool spots together early on. Bart Gunn still sucks. Vince also still hasn't figured out who's Zip and who's Skip. He kept calling Candido Zip in this match. That's what happens when you give two really talented guys interchangeable personalities, while also giving nobody a reason to care about them. You just figure nobody will notice when they botch their names. So the Bodies are working over Bart. Phineas comes out to try to confront Sonny, but then Hillbilly Jim and Henry come over to try to prevent him from having a mental conniption. So the Hog Farmers just leave. Meanwhile, there's an alleged match happening in the ring that nobody's reacting to. And well, the Body Donnas take out Billy after he attempts to hit the ring illegally. They drop Bart with a double slingshot. And as Chris goes up for the cross body dive, Bart turns it into a pinning combo and wins it for the Guns. Still had no idea who the good guys or bad guys were in this scenario. I just wound up presuming it was heel versus heel, which explained why nobody in the building cared about it. And this sucked. I had nothing else to add. Sonny looked damn good in a cowgirl outfit. That was the only positive I took away. Then we had Vader versus Ahmed Johnson, which also sucked. Owen was on commentary selling an injured arm. At least I think he was selling. He wasn't in a cast at the pay-per-view when he was in Davy's corner. Unless something happened during the run-in where he hurt his arm. So he was out there with an arm cast, wearing his Right to Censor-inspired outfit. With gold cowboy boots. Which I didn't even notice until he interfered at the end of the match. I can't tell you how hard I laughed when I saw those fucking cowboy boots. God bless Owen. I loved him to death. He looked like such a tool with this outfit. I forgot to mention, too, this is a King of the Ring tournament round. 2 back-to-back King of the Ring matches featuring the likes of Ahmed Johnson and the Ultimate Warrior. That told you everything you need to know about this tournament. Ahmed still can't throw a believable work punch to save his life. In reality, nothing about Ahmed looked believable in the ring from a wrestling standpoint. But the punches in particular were just god ugly. Vader tried here, but he also got really gassed by the end. I have no idea how he managed to go for that moonsault. Considering like a minute prior he was gasping for air trying to hit the ropes. So of course he missed the moonsault. Ahmed grabbed Cornette and threw him into the ring. There was a funny moment where Ahmed just threw Cornette into Vader. Vader just no-sold it and body-checked Cornette to the ground. And Ahmed hit Vader with a spine buster. The referee was trying to get Cornette out of the ring. So that led to Owen going up top and giving Ahmed the cash shot behind the ref's back. And Vader crawled on Ahmed and got the 3. He also lost his mask during some point in the finishing sequence. I didn't even see how. He was always having trouble with that thing. So at least Ahmed didn't advance. That was a blessing. They also played up the story that this is technically Ahmed's first pinfall loss in the WWF. It honestly did not register to me that this is the first time Ahmed lost. They, come to think of it, never really talked much about him being undefeated prior to this. But there you have it. And that also led to them doing the stretcher job with him to close out the show. Because apparently Owen's arm cast was made of lead. It knocked Ahmed out cold and put him into a temporary coma. And I already sort of alluded to the Ahmed Goldust angle from the pay-per-view, but I didn't really elaborate on what exactly happened. So they're wheeling out Ahmed on the stretcher, and as they're getting ready to load him into the ambulance, Goldust shows up to try to give Ahmed mouth-to-mouth, because that's the thing that flagrantly gay people do. They just see a guy draped across a gurney and figure, now's my chance to sexually molest this man while he's unconscious. So Goldust does the deed. Ahmed eventually wakes up and realizes what happened. And then he goes on a wild goose chase through the building for the next several minutes, trying to look for Goldust. He ends up beating down Bob Holly in a stairwell, gets into an altercation with Mark Marrow, who's just kind of standing there doing nothing. Ahmed goes, "Where's Goldust?" And Marrow goes, "He's right there." And he points to his dressing room, which is like 10 feet to the left from where they're standing. Oddly convenient how Goldust is the only one that had a private locker room in this building. So Ahmed spears somebody through the door. Turns out Goldust wasn't actually in the room. Yeah, and the show basically goes off air with Ahmed storming through the halls. You hear a woman screaming off camera in fear. It was quite hokey. This is a WWF sports entertainment segment if there ever was one. It is important to recall how infrequent backstage segments were during this period. I mean, they only really started doing these things at the beginning of the year more often. Maybe they considered this a big deal at the time. I don't know. It just looked overly staged. Like everyone was just conveniently standing in the places they needed to be. Nothing about it was authentic. But that was Vince's MO. So I'm not surprised. Again, the show was kind of in an awkward position where they were still trying to work out the details from the In Your House pay-per-view. So while we did get 2 King of the Ring rounds, they didn't really advance much beyond that. They did announce Shawn and Davey were scheduled for a title rematch at the pay-per-view. But you can tell a lot of these Raws for the next month are going to be containing a lot of King of the Ring prelims. Which might be a good thing in theory, because it'll limit the squash material. At least the matches will have consequences. The only match I remember in the tournament was Austin versus Roberts. And it wasn't even really the match that stood out. It was everything that happened after the fact. But there you have it. That was Raw. Like I said, I was glad I was able to get that In Your House recap in, because while the show wasn't good, it is a historically significant event. And that's what we're all about here on the channel, covering the significant moments in wrestling history and the not-so-significant moments. Just to recap, there will be a show this Friday. We do the usual NWA Mid-South and World Class coverages, and then I'm going to be gone for a little bit. So, them's the breaks. I want to thank everybody for checking out the show, and we'll catch you all on Friday. Take care. Peace out.